But many Russians remember things differently about the 1990s. They remember that decade as a time of license and lawlessness, economic uncertainty and social chaos, a time when criminals and gangsters and robber barons plundered the Russian state and preyed on the weakest in Russian society, a time when many Russians, not just elites and former apparatchiks, but ordinary men and women, experienced a sense of dishonor and dislocation that we in the West did not fully appreciate. I remember that Russia because I saw it firsthand. I remember old women selling their life's belongings along the old Arbat, plates and broken teacups, anything to get by. I remember that Russian soldiers returned home from Eastern Europe and lived in tents because the Russian state was just too weak and too poor to house them properly. I remember talking to my Russian friends, tolerant, open, progressive people who felt an acute sense of shame during that decade, not at the loss of the Soviet Union, but at the feeling of not recognizing their own country anymore, the Bolshoi theater falling apart, pensioners unable to pay their bills, the Russian Olympic team in 1992 parading into the games under a flag that no one had ever seen and receiving gold medals to an anthem that no one had ever heard. There was a humiliating sense that nothing Russian was good enough anymore. This does not excuse Russian behavior, but it helps to set a context for it. It helps to explain why many ordinary Russians felt relieved and proud when new leaders emerged at the end of the last decade who sought to reconstitute the Russian state and reassert its power abroad. An imperfect authority was seen as better than no authority at all. What has become clear is that the legitimate goal of rebuilding the Russian state has taken a dark turn. With the rollback of personal freedoms, the arbitrary enforcement of the law, the pervasive corruption at various levels of Russian society, and the paranoid, aggressive impulse which has manifested itself before in Russian history to view the emergence of free and independent democratic neighbors, most recently during the so-called color revolutions in Georgia and Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan, not as a source of security, but as a source of threat to Russia's interests. Whatever its course, though, Russia today is not the Soviet Union. Not in the size of its territory, the reach of its power, the scope of its aims, or the nature of the regime. Russia's leaders today have no pretensions to ideological universality, no alternative vision to democratic capitalism, and no ability to construct a parallel system of client states and rival institutions. The bases of Soviet power are gone. And despite their leaders' authoritarianism, Russians today enjoy more prosperity, more opportunity, and in some sense more liberty than in either Tsarist or Soviet times. Russians increasingly demand the benefits of global engagement, the jobs and the technology, the travel abroad, the luxury goods, and the long-term mortgages. With such growing prosperity and opportunity, I cannot imagine that most Russians would ever want to go back to the days, as in Soviet times, when their country and its citizens stood isolated from Western markets and institutions. This, then, is the deeper tragedy of the choices that Russia's leaders are making. It is not just the pain they inflict on others, but the debilitating cost they impose on Russia itself. The way they are jeopardizing the international credibility that Russian businesses have worked so hard to build, and the way that they are risking the real and future progress of the Russian people who have come so far since communism. And for what? Russia's attack on Georgia merely proved what we had already known, that Russia could use its overwhelming military advantage to punish a small neighbor. But Georgia has survived. Its democracy will endure, its economy will be rebuilt, Its independence will be reinforced, its military will in time be reconstituted, and we look forward to the day when Georgia's territorial integrity will be peacefully restored. Russia's invasion of Georgia has achieved, and will achieve, no enduring strategic objective. And our strategic goal now is to make clear to Russia's leaders that their choices could put Russia on a one-way path to self-imposed isolation and international irrelevance. Accomplishing this goal will require the resolve and the unity of responsible countries, most importantly, the United States and our European allies. We cannot afford to validate the prejudices that some Russian leaders seem to have, that if you press free nations hard enough, if you bully them and you threaten them and you lash out, they will cave in and they'll forget, and eventually they will concede. The United States and Europe must stand up to this kind of behavior and to all who champion it. For our sake and for the sake of Russia's people, who deserve a better relationship with the rest of the world, the United States and Europe must not allow Russia's aggression to achieve any benefit. Not in Georgia, not anywhere. We and our European allies are therefore acting as one in supporting Georgia. President Sarkozy, with whom we have worked very closely, is especially to be commended for his leadership on this front. The transatlantic alliance is united. Just this week, NATO Secretary General Yaptehub Skefer led all 26 of our alliance's ambassadors on a mission to Tbilisi to demonstrate our unwavering support for the Georgian people. The door to a Euro-Atlantic future remains wide open to Georgia, and our alliance will continue to work through the new NATO-Georgia Commission to make that future a reality. We and our European allies will also continue to lead the international effort to help Georgia rebuild, an effort that has already made remarkable headway. The United States has put forward a $1 billion economic support package for Georgia. The EU has pledged 500 million euros, and it is preparing to deploy a large mission of civilian observers and monitors to Georgia. In addition, with U.S. and European support, G7 foreign ministers have condemned Russia's actions and pledged to support Georgia's reconstruction. The Asian Development Bank has committed $40 million in loans to Georgia. The IMF has approved a $750 million standby credit facility, and the OSCE is making plans for expanded observers, though Moscow is still blocking this. Conversely, Russia has found little support for its actions. A pat on the back from Daniel Ortega and Hamas is not a diplomatic triumph. At the same time, the United States and Europe are continuing to support unequivocally the independence and territorial integrity of Russia's neighbors. We will resist any Russian attempt to consign sovereign nations and free peoples to some archaic sphere of influence. The United States and Europe are solidifying our ties with those neighbors. We are working as a wider group, including with our friends in Finland and Sweden, who have been indispensable partners throughout this recent crisis. We're backing worthy initiatives like Norway's High North policy. We're working to resolve other regional disputes, such as Nagorno-Karabakh, and to build with friends and allies like Turkey a foundation for cooperation in the Caucasus. And we will not allow Russia to wield a veto over the future of the Euro-Atlantic community, neither what states are offered membership, nor the choice of states that accept it. We have made this particularly clear to our friends in Ukraine. The United States and Europe are deepening our cooperation in pursuit of greater energy dependence, working with Azerbaijan and Georgia and Turkey and the Caspian countries. We will expand and defend open global energy in the economy from abusive practices. There cannot be one set of rules for Russia, Inc. and another for everyone else. Finally, the United States and Europe, as well as our many friends and allies worldwide, will not allow Russia's leaders to have it both ways, drawing benefits from international norms and markets and institutions while challenging their very foundation. There is no third way. A 19th century Russia and a 21st century Russia cannot operate in the world side by side. To reach its full potential, though, Russia needs to be fully integrated into the international political and economic order. But Russia is in the precarious position today of being half in and half out. If Russia ever wants to be more than just an energy supplier, its leaders have to recognize a hard truth. Russia depends on the world for its success, and it cannot change that. Already, Russia's leaders are seeing a glimpse of what the future might look like if they persist with their aggressive behavior. In contrast to Georgia's position, Russia's international standing is worse than at any time since 1991, and the cost of this self-inflicted isolation has been steep. Russia's civil nuclear cooperation with the United States is not going anywhere now.